By the time I left, I was responsible for 70 hours of programming because we had a.
This is Danny, our webmaster, by the way.
I was some guy. I just figured that people walk in off the street and put things in front of you. I don't know what it is, but you know, it's your house. So yeah, we had Meet the Press and the Today Show, and then we also had a primetime. A show called Dateline, which ended up being on 2 or 3 times a week, and then an overnight, all the overnight broadcasting was a news show.
Who did Meet the Press before Russer?
Well, when I went there, it was Chris Wallace, and who was a nice guy, but he was like an ankle biter. You know, he was always chewing like a puppy chewing on your ankle, and I decided that the viewers were more interested in watching him chew than in what the person was saying. So I took him off, and I put on a guy named Garrick Utley, who I'd ironically enough gone to college with. And
he used to fill in for like John Chancellor.
Yeah, and he would do it, but he was more came off more like a Secretary of State, you know, and. So that didn't work either, and so that's when I finally had the good sense to put Tim on, and it was a half-hour show, and it was so successful, I called up Tim, I said, let's make it an hour. And he said, oh, I don't know if I could fill an hour. I said, well, we'll find out, and so it became a huge success with him on it.
And your story earlier was that you wanted him to go on TV because he was in the background. He was a senior vice president of NBC News in New York, but he was not on the air. And we argued and argued. I said, you know so much about politics and everything, you ought to do it. And we argued and argued and argued, and he didn't want to do it, you know. And I mean, this went on for months. And finally I said, Tim, you just got to do it, you know. The show's in trouble, and you'd be great. He said, well, I can't. Finally, I said, well, why can't you? You know, he'd give me all these reasons. He said, well, really, he says, the reason is, he says, I'm ugly. And I said, well, you know, we're not arguing that, Tim. That kind of irritated him. So I had these sweatshirts made up with his picture on the front, said, Tim Russer. And said, not just another pretty face. And because he does kind of look like he's made out of silly putty sometimes, you know. But he has, as I said, what my father used to call an affidavit face. You believe him. You look at him and you believe him. He kind of set the bar for what he did, though, don't you think?
He did. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I tell you, this political year, you really miss him. You miss his insights. You miss his calmness. You miss his being able to put things in perspective.
Do we have a new Tim Russer?
I don't think so. You know, somebody asked me who I'd put on. Al Newhart of USA Today. I happened to be having lunch with him.
He asked you, or you put him on?
You know, he asked me. Right after the funeral, I happened to be having lunch over at the Freedom Forum where Al was and some others, and they were arguing about who they'd put on, you know, and they all had these. And so I walked in. They said, who would you put on? I said, if I was still there, I'd put on Bob Costas. I said, I think he's smart. He does his homework. He's wide-ranging. He'd be terrific. And I said, if Costas wouldn't do it, I'd put on Bryant Gumbel. But I suspect that neither one of those will be put on. And
Costas is an interesting guy. He's been around for a long time, but he still looks so young. I mean, he's like Dick Clark.
Yeah, he said that. He said when he was young, young sportscaster, a guy, NBC head of sports, there was a guy named Don Ohlmeyer, came into him and said, you know, Costas, you're pretty good and everything. Said, but you know, you just look so young. He said, do you think it would help any if you grew a beard? If you looked any, would that help you look older? And Costas says, yeah, it would. And Ohlmeyer said, you sure? And Costas says, yeah. He says, I'd look 5 years older. He says, because it would take me 5 years to grow the beard.
That's good. He came from KMOX, didn't he, in St. Louis?
Yeah, he's from St. Louis. He's a wonderful guy. He comes to town. He called me up the other day. He said, I'm over in Omaha at the Olympic swim trials. He said, I see you have a game tonight. Can I come over? I said, no, Bob, I'd rather you don't. But,
did he come?
Oh, yeah, he came over, and then he called me. He said, I'm going to be a little bit late. And I said, what happened? He was with his son, who was 21. He said, I'm driving across, and I'm on Interstate 80, and I see a sign that says Van Meter, Iowa. So I said to my son, that's famous for baseball. Do you know why? And he says, my son knows a lot about baseball, but he didn't know. He said, so I explained to him about Bob Feller. He says, a mile later, I see a sign that says Bob Feller Museum. He said, well, I resisted the John Wayne birthplace, but I couldn't resist the Bob Feller Museum. So we go in there, and he said, I go in there, and we walk around. We have a wonderful time. He said, nobody knew who I was. There's some little old lady in there running it. And he said, a great time. He said, I'm walking out, and he said, there's a baseball game, a high school baseball game. He said, so I say to Keith, his son, says, let's watch a couple innings. I said, anybody recognize you? He says, yeah. He says, a guy came over, and he said, I mean, aren't you Bob Costas? And he says, yeah, I am. He said, what are you doing here? He said, well, there's a baseball game, so I thought I'd watch it. And the guy says, really? He says, yeah. And so the guy walked back, and then Costas got up and left. And I said, now, you know what's happening tomorrow? And he said, what? And I said, there's a bunch of guys having coffee in Van Meter. And there's one guy going to be there says, you know what, the game last night? He said, Bob Costas was there. And they're going to say, Bob Costas was not at a high school baseball game in Van Meter. And they're going to argue. And the guy said, no, I swear it. So did you get his autograph? No. And finally some guy's going to say, you know the beer truck driver over in Greenfield? That's the guy who looks like Costas. That's who it was.
Oh, man, that's good. 8:47 here at
Van and Bonnie on News Radio 1040.
Well, it's 8:53, and Michael, you can get tickets now for the Iowa Cubs, I guess?
Yes, you can.
Not too early?
243-6111 or 1-800-GO-ICubs, and you can buy tickets for next year. You can buy skyboxes for next year. You can get clothing. You can do whatever you want to do. The place is open, and we welcome your calls.
Yeah, you have a gift shop down there. Is that open most of the time?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And it's full of great baseball stuff and some university stuff from the 3 Iowa universities, and it's a great place to buy birthday gifts, Christmas gifts. How long could I talk about this?
Well, and then you have the Cub Club where anybody can come have...
We have the Cub Club, which is open Monday through Friday for breakfast. It's starting at 7 and for lunch every day. And the food is good, the parking is free, and the view is spectacular.
And you do not have to be a member.
You do not have to be a member. You only have to be a member if you want to eat there during a baseball game, during the season, for dinner.
It's a fun place to go, especially if you've never been there before.
But if you've been there before, it's not no harm in coming back, though, Van.
Right. That's exactly right.
It's not a once-in-a-lifetime experience.
8:55, let's check our time saver traffic. Here's Brad.
Morning, this report is brought to us by the Iowa Lottery.
Down in your office down there at the ballpark. I assume that's where your office is, right?
Well, I have to go out and I have to paint all the signs, and then I have to go out and I have to mow the field, and then I have to go down and sweep out the concourse, and then I have to go out and paint new parking strips on it. I do it all myself.
Boy, you know? That's really impressive. Yeah, you have a good work ethic. Yeah. Except that you lie.
Oh, there's a lot of closing down the stadium from the year. There's a lot of minor repair work that is done.
Got any plans for next year? Anything special?
Well, we're continuing to work on the park. We've built a little bit of a city park out behind there with the fountains and everything, and we're adding to that all the time. We'll be maintaining the new Miracle Field, which is just across the street. So there's always lots. We'll have new promotions next year. We always like to have something new, but the main attraction is it's great family fun and it's spectacular baseball.
And you kept it that way too. I really like that. It really is very, very. I think it's one of the most family-friendly entertainment venues in town.
It really is, and it's cheaper than going to a movie.
Yeah.
Unless you're going to sit there and drink a whole lot of beers. But, we don't want you to drink a whole lot of beers, just a few.
And enjoy the game.
And enjoy the game. Have fun with your family, have fun with your friends, and come on down, and it's been great being on your show, Van.
Michael Gartner, thank you so much for taking 4 hours to do this. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, we'll talk to you tomorrow. Back in Adam here on News Radio 1040, WHO.